Hello again, my name is John and I am a nobody. I've always been interested in James Butler Hickock, and he has accompanied me throughout my life, which is a bit weird because he died in 1876, I think. But part of his attraction was the fact he had very long hair, which was in at the time, and this big moustache to cover his upper lip, and he wonderful grey eyes, and he was something to behold, or must have been in those days. He was also called the Prince of Pistoleros, and was very capable with a gun. But he was not a nasty guy like a lot of people I could mention. He didn't enjoy killing people. He was just very good at it. He'd been part of the Underground Railroad due to his father's involvement, and he was an all-round interesting, good bloke in my view. He once lived in a town called Hayes, which is in Kansas. And this is where we're going today. The story is a long and interesting one, and I'd like to share it with you. So I have a friend called Robert Upwood, who is also interested in history and the American history, and had big connections there. And he couldn't believe that I had never been to the States. So I told him, and he said, I've read the book and or your manuscript, and I'll take you there. And he did. So we went to California, which I've already covered. I'll have to save the trip for another time, otherwise it will be too long. But one of my finest memories, most wonderful memories, is coming down off the snow-capped Rocky Mountains and with Rob, and stopping off at a place to eat something and seeing a pair of hummingbirds feeding from a feeder. I'll never forget that. I was not expecting them. But as I always say, always expect the unexpected. So back to Hickock. So because he was such an incredible guy and accompanied me throughout my life, when it came time to write some lyrics for the great Ron Spielman in Germany, I did some research on James Butler Hickock, who you might know under the pseudonym Wild Bill, and found out that he'd been in this town in Kansas called Hayes. So I did some research, more research, and the town itself was fascinating. Never did I believe in 1,000 years that I would go there one day, but I did. And thanks to Rob, my friend Robert Upwood, and I did some research in the archive there in Ellis County. So the writing that I did about Hickock, the song lyrics, ended up on an album by the great Ron Spielman, and Hickock had already been an inspiration to me, obviously. And I couldn't believe it when I was walking the same streets that Hickock had once walked. It was quite an amazing experience. And I discovered perhaps the first hero of the civil rights movement, who was actually an Irishman, and he had replaced Hickock in an election. Hickock was a Republican who, well, the Republicans were slightly different in those days. Abraham Lincoln was a Republican, for example, and they were very anti-slavery. The Democrats were very pro-slavery, pro-keep everything as it is. And it was just an incredible experience. Peter Lanahan replaced Hickock as the sheriff of Ellis County and was, as I mentioned, or started to mention, perhaps the first hero of the civil rights movement, because he died, sadly, in Hayes. And I've been to the spot where he died and laid flowers, because he was quite an incredible man. If you think about it, it was not like these days where you just get on the radio and call for backup. He was on his own. He got shot on the corner, and even though he was mortally wounded, he went inside what was then a restaurant and confronted the mob who had turned up to execute him. And the people inside, some of them had actually engaged in this despicable act with a black lady who Lanahan had attempted to save, or at least her honor, and have the men tried and found guilty. Things obviously didn't turn out in those days, in 1871, like one might expect. But I take my hat off to Peter Lanahan. He's really an unsung hero. So nobody's heard of him apart from this particular Englishman and maybe a couple of other people. I'll stop now because otherwise this will be too long. But take care of yourselves. Think of the wonderful people in our lives who have made our lives better. In my case, it's obvious who that was. And not the only nice person I've met in my life, by the way. I have met a lot of very nice men and women. But this will keep me going for a week, and then I'll be returning to Kansas another time. So this is the memory of Peter Lanahan and Wild Bill Hickock, and thank you to both of them for your service, and you take care of yourself and those you love, and I'll see you in the next one. Alrighty, bye for now, and take care. Tschüssikowski.